Sure, if you're not at this, what else are you going at? There's nothing better than going around the harbour having a yarn. Good day, boys, and welcome to this episode 10 of the Harbour Yarn Podcast with myself, Adam Hatter, also known as Harbour Customs. Boys, you can catch up with me on all of my socials. Everything goes out on TikTok, but in the past good while, I've cross-posted everything to Instagram as well. So what you see on TikTok, you'll also see on Instagram, probably with a little bit extra, because I do throw up a scatter all post on the gram as well. This podcast right now is living on YouTube, but I've got the audio files being uploaded to Spotify, so if you're someone like myself that enjoys listening to it while you're driving along, well, boy, I got you covered. She's on the Spotify as well. But YouTube will be the spot if you want to see my old mug while we're having a yarn here. Now, boys, how did episode 9 get received? Well, boy, like the past good few, the previous episode is not yet out. But I do have it chopped up. She is ready to go. So she should be out here in the next couple of days. That's just the way the production schedule, I will say, usually rolls. But the past few, and episode 9 included, I don't have a guest on. Boy, it's just been flat out. I feels like a broken record saying that, but by time is at a premium. And it's hard to try to link everyone up to try to actually get them in. But have no fear, boys, the communication lines are still open. We're going to have a few guests on here. Eventually, it's just going to take us a little while to get there. Stay tuned, boys. You don't have to just buckle in and listen to me. It does enough of that when I throw the content out on TikTok and Instagram. There's no mistake about that. Moving on to us and to go with me, boys. Well, boy, like I say, time is always at a premium, and it seems like I'm always moving, always busy. But what we've been talking about for a good spell, boys, the new hats did arrive. They arrived the first part of the hitch, and since then, they're all gone. I ordered in 50. All of them is gone. So that's a pretty good take-up. You see, it's the new colorway we got on the go here. Matches the coveralls, I would almost say, the blaze, orange, and the navy. But that being said, I got another order put in now. Now, there is a good little bit of lead time if you've been following along with the hat situations. The lead time is long, but I can't argue with the quality of the hats. So I'm going to stick with it. So we have another order of hats in now. I would say a bigger order this time around. And we're experimenting with a couple of different colorways. I think there's 6 different colorways on this order. Now, I don't want to give it all away, boys, but there might just be a good old Republic colorway mixed in all those color combinations. You'll have to follow along and stick around and see what I comes up with. But I do think it will look pretty dandy when we actually get it here in hand. So past me, it was also looking out for future me. I sat down to write up the running order for this last night. And when I opened up the file, I had already generated a nice bit of it just to give myself a little bit of a running start when I got in from offshore. So at that time, we were leading up to the elections. Elections was on the go. It pretty well dominated a lot of the media that you see going around. Now, since then, the elections have come past. The elections were last week now, I suppose. We're just a week past, so it's all over with. But I noticed when we were in the lead up to elections, there was a lot of bleed over from all the carnage that's going on in the political scene down in the United States. Myself, I try to stay out of most of the news cycles, let alone what's going on in the US political scene. That's just me. But I did notice there was a lot of bleed over leading up to that. Like I say, it's all over and done with now. We got the results. The people have voted. The big thing for me was that people are educated about the vote and people actually got out and vote. Now, it does seem like people did get out and vote. I think the numbers were pretty good. I want to say it was almost around 70%. That's just me going off the numbers I thinks I heard. Wouldn't quote that, boys. I wouldn't quote it. But it seems like people did get out and vote. We got what we got. So all we can see now is how good of a job they can do with a minority government in there now. I also had a note that people are far too easily swayed or convinced without actually fact-checking what they're looking at. Like I saw one that come up the other day. The new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, it was an AI-generated video of him talking about how all the tint on vehicles is going to be banned and lifts and levels and trucks are going to be taken away. Now, boys, he's a Prime Minister for less than a week. I doubt the biggest thing on his agenda is to get up and have a presser about those couple of little topics there. It was obviously a fake or a spoof, but you wouldn't believe the amount of people that grabbed hold to it and ran with it and took it as actual truth and took it like this was something he got up and said. Boys, you got to fact check your sources. And the note I had there to bring me back to that point and talking about the video, we're out to work and it was around Easter time and I was reading a press release that was after being put out. I won't get into which one it was. Anyway, I was reading it out to the boys to get a little bit of a laugh at them. And right at the end of it, I said, and remember, Jesus died on the cross for this. And one of the young fellas that I was working with said, they never said that. I was like, yes, they did, but it was right there. Why would they say that? They got nothing to do with religion. And he actually come over to the computer and wanted to have a look at it to see if they were after saying it. Now, of course, boys, that wouldn't in the press release, but he had that hook, line, and sinker and did believe they put that into that press release. And I don't know if he would have kept believing it if I never told him no different or if I had to type it in on the computer screen. Boys, case in point, you got to fact check all your sources all the time. You get so many different sources of media and news coming at you now. You need to know that you're getting them from a reputable source. Now, before I came home this time, I noticed that Kingfishr was going playing in Toronto. For those of you that don't know, Kingfishr is a band in Ireland that's blowing up in popularity, and I find them deadly. I'm not really sure what category you put them into, but their sound is deadly. Now, one night I was perusing all their show dates just to see where they were at, and lo and behold, they were playing up in Toronto my first week off. So I started looking. I looked at the flights up to Toronto. Boys, what a wild price. I tell you, when I started looking at them first, you could get a flight cheaper return to Dublin than you could Toronto. Now, thinking about it all, it's probably handy about the same distance, if not a little bit less. But the price on it was wild to travel within Canada. So I shagged around, I waited around, I said perhaps I'll get it on a better price. Me indecision struck and hit me again, because obviously the longer I waited, there was no seat sale, there was no sale on ticket prices, it only went up from there. I went to get the tickets to go see the show were $30. Obviously that was sold out because it was only a 200 person venue. So I went on Ticketmaster to look at them. Now the first time I looked at them, I think they were about $80 a person. They sold originally for 30, but I could stomach paying $80 to go see the show. I realised they were all sold out, that was fine enough. When I finally said shag it on the price of the flights, I went back to book the tickets to go see the band. Boys, the tickets had increased from $30 a ticket up to $350 a person. So it was going to be $700 for myself and the wife to go see Kingfishr in a 200 person venue. Now, people pay thousands of dollars to go see shows and all that, boys, but $700 was a little too dear, on top of almost $1,000 each to get up and back to Toronto return. So suffice to say, I wouldn't up to Toronto on this days off. Now, if I had to book them in the beginning when I first started about it and say it was spur of the moment, I would have got off much better, less than half. I would have went up, got to see Kingfishr, would have been deadly. But they're gone on now. I think they're wrapping up their North American end of the tour now tonight, somewhere down the States anyway. Then they're heading back over in Ireland and Europe, travelling around for a few shows. So it's hard to say when I'll get to see him again. Hopefully I can get a trip over to Ireland and catch him somewhere playing, somewhere in amongst it all. We'll never know. But boys, let that be a lesson to you if you has a little bit of the indecision. If you get the means to go do whatever you want to go do, go on and do it. Because tomorrow's not guaranteed, and I can guarantee what is guaranteed, the cost on it is going to go up. So take advantage when you seize it. Now, on the back end of that, no, I didn't get up to see Kingfishr. I was a little bit sad about that. There's no mistake. But a couple of days after I made peace with that, I was sat down doing a TikTok live. I was just about to jump off for the night. A little message come up in the chat, said, check your DMs. I wouldn't show her the screen name. I said, bye. All right, I'll check him, but who's this? This was the drummer of the Whistlin Donkeys, boys. So I checked the DMs. I went in, had a little yarn with them, and figured out that they were playing a show that weekend in St. John's. Now, I had heard of the show months prior while I was offshore, but whatever way I had the dates all lined up, I figured I was offshore for the show, so I didn't think no more about it at all. He reached out to me. That was the first I had heard tell of it since. So talking back and forth to me, he said, bye, you should try to get out to the show if you can. I looked at it and said, bye, would love to. The Irish Descendants were opening up and then they were playing. He said, bye, I'll see if I can hook you up with a couple of tickets on the door. Now, I went around the next day, I said, imagine the happenstance of that, just the fact that I was on a TikTok live and I ended up making that link to him. Anyway, he got us a couple of tickets on the door. Myself and the wife went to the show, and it was absolutely deadly, boys. Like you say, the Irish Descendants open up, played a wicked set, absolutely deadly set, and boys, there was a good and big crowd at the arena, and let me tell you, when they done Let Me Fish off Cape St. Mary's, and boys, that song is going to get inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame now, I think later on this month, if not in the next couple of days here now, while the ECMAs is on the go on that. Boys, what a job they done. And I'm going to tell you now, if you can get out and see one of their shows, take the time, go get the ticket and go see them, because, boys, they do play a deadly show. Madeline Carter and the Fiddle Boys, they hear that echoing up through the Mary Brown Centre. Boy, I'm going to tell you, it was something else. Anyway, they played a wicked set. Hats off to the boys. One more shout out to them. If the Irish Descendants are playing anywhere handy to you, go get the ticket and go see them, boy. It's never a bad thing to be supporting local. So the boys finished up and the Whistlin Donkeys came on, and boy, what a show they did play as well. I was talking to the boys after. That was the first arena show they had actually played. And I thought it was set up perfect. I had my fellow dad reach out to me, Oscar, and boys, shout out to you again, Oscar, for making all that happen that night. Because only for that, I don't think I would have even realised the show was on the go, probably until the night of, and it would have been too late for me to go on down. Oscar was up beating on the drums. We were up on the rail, like I was saying, looking down to see where we were at, and boy, what a show they did play. I know I mentioned the Irish Descendants doing Let Me Fish off Cape St. Mary's, echoing up through the Mary Brown Centre, and it was deadly. But another deadly one I did see was the whole of the Mary Brown Centre singing along with the Whistlin Donkeys to Grace. To actually see that happen somewhere outside Ireland, boy, absolutely wild. To be there and take part in it and witness it, boy, it was a dandy old show. And thinking back on it now, their bass player is like something let out of a cage, boys. The actual stage presence he got prancing around and dancing around, you can feel how good of a time he's having just by having a gawk at him. Now, once the show was all over, we managed to get out, go down to O'Reilly's and have a couple of pints with the boys. Solid bunch of fellas got down, had a good little yarn with them. Hopefully it'll be the first of many. I brought down a couple of hats for the boys to trade over with them. They threw me one of their excess passes there for the tour. I thought it was great, boys. So, much in the same way that I shouted out our descendants, boys, if the Whistlin Donkeys are anywhere handy to you, or you happens to be somewhere that they're playing, boy, take the time, go see him. They plays a wicked show. I can't wait till he comes back again so I can get out to see him. Now, boys, enough about me. We'll move on to the next segment of the Harbour Yarn podcast, and that's the topic, boys. And last podcast, episode 9, we talked about town rivalries in Newfoundland. That was the topic. We had a nice little bit of feedback in and around with that. I thought we were going to get more between Paradise, Mount Pearl, and St. John's, all that kind of Avalon metro area. Didn't get a whole lot of it, be honest with you. But what I did get was Lewisport and Twillingate. I didn't realise there was such a rivalry between the boys. They say it's centred a lot around hockey. One of my buddies that I was working out with the past couple of hitches on the Sea Rolls, Matt Burge. Matt, this is your shout out. I told you I'd give you one if you're following along there. But Matt is from up in Twillingate, and he said the rivalry is strong when it comes to a game of hockey. Couldn't really say where it all originated to, but there was always a bit of grit there. I also touched on Grand Falls, Windsor, and Bishop's Falls. I didn't really know what was on the go with that. I always do mention when I'm driving by, I don't know where one starts and the other begins. I only know that I stops into the Irving in Bishop's Falls, and the eastward end of it, I usually stops in there to get a coffee before I makes me way back east on the rest of the highway. But it don't seem like there was a lot of friction in between there, maybe a few packets of it, more centred around between themselves and Gander. But by and large, there wasn't a whole lot of rivalries in between towns here in Newfoundland. I was a little bit surprised on it. Had to be a little bit more than that, but seems like we're pretty good at getting along. Boy, for the most part, we're a pretty easygoing bunch, so I suppose it kind of makes sense that way. But it's always fun to have a little few small, fun rivalries in between it. Just keeps it interesting, boys. So, moving outside of that topic, for this podcast, the topic I put out was plans for spring. And I did get a nice bit of feedback on that. Most of it was much in line with myself. People are walking away from the cold season hobbies and trying to break back into some new hobbies as spring comes about. People getting their RVs out. People starting to stretch their legs and get out and hike a couple of trails as the weather do improve. And we have had a few days of weather, albeit it was separated by more days of poor weather. But that's just the way it lays down springtime here in Newfoundland sometimes. Myself, for a new hobby, I picked up a gravel bike. I was getting a good bit of use out of that, but we're switched in to enduro riding there now because it is an early spring for us and it seems like the ground has dried up fairly well. So I got the enduro bike back on the go doing laps out the White Hills. Gravel bike never got a whole lot of use early on in the season, but it'll be a nice thing and in between as we go through the summer. I was also trying to knock off all the sections of the East Coast Trail over the next few years anyway in a measured approach. Now I was doing well at it last hitch. I haven't hiked one yet this hitch, hoping to get 1 or 2 sections on the go now before I heads back to work next week. But we'll see how it goes. Like I say, boys, time is at a premium, so you're only going doing so much. And linking into that, it seems like when the weather starts to break and starts fining up, it seems like you wants to get at everything, whether it be the hobbies or cleaning up around the door or some new project that you got on the go. It seems like you wants to get at it all at once. And I did get some feedback that way as well. People were trying to get everything tidied up and cleaned up. I know I gutted both my garages there the other day just to clean all the floor up onto them. Give them a good map, give them a good shine. And I got to say, the top garage is looking pretty tidy there now. We got something coming down the pipe for that now in the next hitch, I would say. There'll be more on that in the next podcast. I'll touch on it. But everything got a good scrub and a good clean, and it just seems like spring is the time of year to do that. Even Big Red got our first big wash of the year yesterday. I did do a little bit on TikTok on that yesterday. I always get my rig spray undercoated in the fall of the year to try to protect them against all the salt and the corrosion and the rust through the winter months because, boy, we lays everything down with salt on the road. And what's not laid down on the road with salt is spraying in after water. It's no trouble to get up after a good northeast blow, and the windows in the house is coated with salt, so he knows what that's doing for the rig. Anyway, always gets her undercoated, and every spring when she gets her first wash, this year being no different, the rig is buried with the undercoating. It's all bleeding after seams and are stuck onto the paint. And boy, I spoiled 2 good rags yesterday wiping it off her. I made the joke that I probably took 2 or 3 pound undercoating off the painted surfaces of the rig. She's looking pretty handy there now, but boy, they must give her a good old spray up underneath for all of it to be going. I knows any time I had to get up underneath her and turn a bolt onto her, you wouldn't see salad. I can't say the same when I was doing the old bag bike there last week. There was more than a couple of nuts and bolts rusted shut on her, I can guarantee you that. So, there must be something to the crown undercoating. Yeah, and that, boys, never had too many specific things there for what people had planned in spring. So, boys, if you got your story or your yarn connected to one of these topics that I do broach on this Harbour Yarn podcast, boy, write to me in. My vision, will say, for the topic section of this podcast was to get all scatter story or yarn and read them out on here, just to have a good laugh and generate a little bit of discussion around it. So, boy, if you got a story connected to either of these topics, don't be shy, don't be afraid. You send us a DM, send us an email, harbourcustomsnl@outlook.com. If you got one connected to a topic in a past podcast, boy, listen, there's no time expiration on any of that. You send it along in. We can always have a good yarn about it. We'll step away from this podcast topic and I'll broach the next one here now. I should put a bit of media out on that here in the next few days. But talking about what's on the go with me there this hitching, and I went to see the Whistlin Donkeys. I never got up to see Kingfishr up in Toronto. Boys, what's the best concert that you've gone to? Thinking about it now. Now, not everyone is a concert goer. Myself, I'm in the middle of the road. I'll try to get out to some concerts with bands or performers that I really enjoys the music too, but I'm not a diehard. Got to get out and see every concert that interests me any bit at all. I'm not so far as that, but I do enjoy getting out to an old show and taking in a little bit of music. And like you say, for the local end of it, just supporting the local acts. But in all that, do you have a favourite concert that you've ever went to? Which one sticks out in your head to be the favourite? For me to think about it, I've not been to a whole lot. It's not like there's a countless amount. But the one that stands out the most in my mind is when I went to see the 2 Johnnies in Cork City. Just the way it all laid down. Myself and Jessica got to the hotel in Cork City. In the evening, we were going down to Kinsale to get a bite to eat, and she see the little pamphlet on the desk in the hotel room. She said, Adam, the 2 Johnnies is playing like here tomorrow night. I said, no, but it can't be. She said, yes. She said, place called the Old Oak. So we looked down to it. It was nowhere away from the hotel. I said, boy, it's like a sign. Now, we had tried to meet up with the 2 Johnnies a little bit earlier in the trip, but they were releasing their album that week, and we didn't realise how much time we were going to burn up travelling around Ireland. We were constantly moving, so it was going to be tough to actually try to carve out any other time anyway. But when I see that, I said, bye, we got to go see him. And that show was part of their album release that was going on at the time last year. Small Town Heroes, boys. If you haven't given it a listen, head over to Spotify, spin it up. The boys are solid. Anyway, we went over to the Old Oak, see the boys that night. What a show they played. Jessica always says now, when we goes back to Ireland, if we goes to see another 2 Johnny show, she'll know all the words, because after that night and the next day when we drove up to County Clare to go hike the cliffs some more, that's all I had on the car on the way up. It was 2 Johnny straight time. She knows most of the words, so a lot of their tracks there now. But that was the one that stood out to me, just how it all came together and happened, and it was a solid show too. That's the one that stands out to me for my favourite concert I ever went to. But what about yourselves, boys? Which one stands out to ye? Is it a smaller gig that's closer to home, maybe a local act, or one of these mega performers, or a huge band that you travelled away to see? I see a lot of people on my socials now the past week. They were up to see Metallica. I think that was last weekend in Toronto. That looked like a wild show. I'm not a huge fan of Metallica, but I do like some of their songs. But just the atmosphere of one of them shows seems massive. But what about ye, boys? Let us know. Write in, send us an old DM, send us an old email. Tell us about your favourite show, how it came to be, why it was your favourite show. We'll have an old yarn about it, because that's all this old podcast is, boys, the Harbour Yarn. I'd love to hear it. Now, boys, moving on to the guest portion of this podcast, I do have people in the works. I only reached out to someone a few minutes before I started this podcast on the old phone just to see if I can meet up with him Monday before I travels back offshore. But like you say earlier, boys, time is always at a premium. We will get a guest on. I don't know if we'll have one here now. If not, you'll see this little portion of me just having a yarn with ye. If we do, well, boy, the guest will be there. But in the case that we don't have a guest, that's another thing to reach out with too, boys. Who would you like to see? I have a guest list there that I'm working through just between scheduling and all that. But who would you like to have on across from me to have an all yarn with me, who would you like to see? And what would you like me to ask them? What would you like us to yarn about? You let us know, boys. We're always open to suggestions there. Now, moving into the last topic of this episode 10 of the Harbour Yarn podcast, boys, and that's the VOCM topic of this week. Now, there's any number of news stories that I could have perused last night on the VOCM topic, but I chose one that was maybe down the corner, didn't really get the headline that I thought it might deserve, and that was a 76-year-old driver passing a school bus somewhere in the province earlier this week. Now, boys, I could have picked any number of topics, but I believe that is an important one. Boys, when the lights are flashing on the school bus, you get to come to a stop. If you don't have the wherewithal in you to see those flashing red lights and a big old red stop sign that folds out on the bus, well, boy, you should really be questioning if you should be driving at all. The thought that comes to my mind every time this conversation comes up: if you can't notice a big yellow school bus with her lights flashing, alerting you to stop, what would you do at a crosswalk? If someone was crossing the road at a crosswalk, would you even notice they were there? Much less than that, if a youngster run out in front of the road, don't have to be a crosswalk, that could be anywhere. Boy, you got to have your wits about you. And to hear these stories, and they do come up from time to time, it's wild to think that we're still talking about this, but it do happen. People not stopping for the school bus is getting the time of year now, and there's more youngsters out and on the move, walking around, whether it be back and forth up to the shop or over to the playground. Young ones on the move, and not only young ones either. There's all kinds of people walking around everywhere. There's people that enjoys getting out and making the most of the day outside. Boys, you got to be careful when you're driving, and if it comes down to it that you don't notice them old flashing red lights on the school bus and the stop sign out, boy, hang up the keys. It's time to be done. It absolutely floors me when I still see stories like this pop up, because the potential there is not low. That is a deadly potential, what you're talking about with that. All you can say, boys, is whenever you're behind the wheel, focus on what you're at. Little bit of a more serious VOCM topic there for this week, boys, but it is something important to be talked about. And with that one wrapped up, boys, we're coming to another close on this episode 10 of the Harbour Yarn podcast. Boys, I always do say thanks if you made it this far. I do enjoy sitting down and doing these podcasts, but there's a lot of work in on the end of it, so the fact that someone will actually sit down and listen to me yarn on there for the better part of a half hour or an hour, well, boy, it do mean something. If you're not following along on my social, boys, you can go and check them out. Like I said earlier, I'm on TikTok, Instagram. This podcast right now is living on YouTube, but I also got audio files on Spotify if you enjoys listen to your podcast that way. Boys, all I can say is I'm in the last week of my days off here now. The weather have been touch and go this week. You really got to try to pick your days just the way it is. It is springtime here in Newfoundland, but my hope to you is that while you're watching this, I'm definitely offshore by now, but hopefully the weather has improved and you can actually get out and enjoy what Newfoundland got to offer. No doubt there's activities you can do all throughout the year, but it's always nicer when you got a nice sunny sky up and a fresh breeze, not too much of a gale, but a decent old breeze in along. But you can have a really dandy day out of that. So wherever you're at and wherever you're to, I hope the weather can improve enough so you can get out and enjoy it. One thing I've said earlier on this year is don't let the weather dictate how you feel or what you're going to do. You just work around the weather. Don't let the weather work you. It's easier said than done, boys. I knows myself when I looks out the door and I was going sideways with the rain or the black tick of fog, I'm not that motivated to go for a big old bike run up in White Hills. But there's other stuff you can do to work around the weather so you don't let the weather knock out a full day. I know that this rotation racket, you really got to be apt for a little bit of flexibility to try to maximize the enjoyment on your days off, no matter what kind of weather you're having. So I can only hope that for you too, boys. But hopefully the weather gets a little bit more stable so you don't have to do as much adapting. That's it for me on this episode 10, boys. We'll catch you on the next one. Until then, boys, take care of yourself. And like VOCM always do say, arrive alive, boys. VOCM cares.